What happens when the person you love decides your home is something they're entitled to charge you for? Tonight's story isn't just about rent, it's about entitlement, betrayal, and the moment a woman realizes love has turned into a transaction. Welcome to Revenge Mountain, where emotion flows, pain becomes strength, and karma always finds its way back. My name is Marianne Cole. I'm 32 years old. For most of my adult life, stability wasn't something I stumbled into. It was something I built, deliberately, brick by brick. I didn't inherit wealth. I didn't marry into it. I worked, saved, planned, and said no to a lot of things people my age said yes to. 6 years ago, I bought my apartment. 2 bedrooms, clean lines, a quiet building in a decent neighborhood where people nodded politely but didn't pry. I remember the exact feeling of standing in the empty living room the day the keys were handed to me. My footsteps echoing against bare walls, sunlight cutting across unfinished floors. It didn't feel like luxury. It felt like control. 3 years later, after aggressive payments and a small inheritance from my grandfather, the mortgage was gone. Free and clear. No bank, no landlord, no one who could tell me what I owed or when I owed it. It wasn't just a place to live, it was proof that I could stand on my own. Then I met Nathan Reed. We met at a friend's birthday dinner, one of those crowded, loud restaurants where conversations overlap and people talk more with their hands than their mouths. Nathan had an easy confidence. Not flashy, not loud, just comfortable in his own skin. He asked thoughtful questions. He remembered my answers. When he smiled, it felt intentional, not performative. We started dating slowly. Weekend dinners, long walks, shared playlists, the kind of relationship that doesn't explode into existence but quietly settles in. 2 years later, we were engaged. 3 months after that, the ring still felt strange on my finger. Not heavy, just symbolic. Like a promise I was still learning how to carry. Nathan moved in with me about 14 months ago. We talked about it beforehand, carefully. I was clear from the beginning. The apartment was mine. I owned it outright. That wasn't a flex, it was a boundary. The arrangement was simple. He didn't pay rent. He contributed to utilities and groceries. We split those roughly 60-40, since I earned more. It felt fair, logical, balanced. I cooked most nights, maybe 70% of the time. He helped when he could. Cleaning was shared in that loose, imperfect way most couples manage. Emotional support flowed both directions, or at least I thought it did. For a long time it worked. Or maybe it just looked like it did. Nathan liked telling people, "This place feels like home now." He said it casually, affectionately. I took it as a compliment. I didn't hear the quiet claim underneath it. There were small things I ignored. Comments that didn't quite land right. "Must be nice not having to worry about rent. You're lucky you bought when you did. My sister says property changes people." I brushed them off. We all carry different histories around money. Different insecurities. I didn't want to be the woman who guarded her success like a weapon. We were building a life, after all. Last Tuesday, Nathan came home late. I was on the couch, laptop balanced on my knees, half watching a show I'd already seen. He smelled like citrus and alcohol, the unmistakable scent of drinks with company. His sister's company, as it turned out. He didn't sit next to me. He sat across from me, hands folded, posture deliberate. That was the first thing that set off my internal alarm. "Marianne," he said, voice careful, "we need to talk." There it was, the sentence no one ever uses when the conversation is going to be good. I muted the TV and set the laptop aside. "Okay," I said, calm, open, willing. He took a breath, like someone preparing to step onto a stage. "I've been thinking about our living situation." I nodded. "What about it?" "Well, I live here. I've lived here for over a year. This is my home, too." The word "too" lingered in the air between us. "I agree," I said cautiously. "It's your home in the sense that we live here together." He shook his head. "No, I mean legally. Practically. I have rights." That word again. Rights. "To what?" I asked. "To the apartment. To equity. To security." He leaned forward. "I contribute to this household. I deserve recognition for that." For a moment, I honestly thought I was missing something, like I'd skipped a chapter and everyone else knew the plot. "You don't pay rent," I said carefully. "You help with groceries and utilities. What equity are you talking about?" "That's exactly my point." His arms crossed. Defensive now, rehearsed. "I give you free labor. Cooking, cleaning, emotional support. That has value." My stomach tightened, not in anger yet, but confusion. "I do most of the cooking," I said. And emotional support is part of being in a relationship. He didn't flinch. I've decided I'm charging you rent now, he said. $800 a month. It's only fair. I laughed. I didn't mean to. It just slipped out, light and incredulous. Then I saw his face. He wasn't joking. I'm serious, he said. My sister says I'm basically subsidizing your lifestyle by not demanding compensation for my contributions. You should be paying me for the privilege of living with me. The room felt suddenly smaller. You want me, I said slowly, to pay you $800 a month to live in my own apartment? Yes, he said without hesitation. That's fair. I stared at him, trying to reconcile the man I thought I knew with the one sitting across from me now. It's our apartment now, he added. I live here. I have rights. Something inside me went very still. Interesting, I said finally. I picked up my phone and typed one line. No texts, no speeches, just a note. He wants rules. I'll need to think about this. He relaxed instantly, smiled, stood up like the conversation had gone exactly the way he expected. Take your time, he said, already heading toward the bedroom. I'm glad we're finally being adults about money. He went to bed that night thinking he'd won something. He had no idea what he'd just started. The next morning, I woke up before my alarm. The apartment was quiet in the way it only gets right before a storm. Still, tense, holding its breath. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying Nathan's words from the night before. Rights, equity, security. He'd said them so confidently, like they were facts everyone else already understood. Like I was the one behind. I got up, showered, dressed for work, moved through my routine on autopilot. When I stepped into the kitchen, Nathan was already there, leaning against the counter with his phone in his hand, scrolling. He looked relaxed, rested, like he'd slept just fine. Morning, he said, cheerful, as if he hadn't tried to invoice me for my own life 12 hours earlier. Morning, I replied. I poured coffee, waited for the kettle, watched the steam rise. I half expected him to bring it up again, to clarify, maybe even soften what he'd said. He didn't. Instead, he said, I told my sister you were thinking about it. I turned slowly. You did? Yeah. She said that's good. It means you're open to compromise. There it was again. Compromise. As if this were two equal claims meeting in the middle. I took my mug and sat at the table. Nathan, what exactly do you think your rights are here? He frowned, like the question itself was unfair. I live here. I've lived here over a year. That gives me tenant rights. To what? I asked. To not being kicked out. To stability. To being acknowledged. He shrugged. I've invested time here. Energy. I gave up my old place. You chose to move in, I said evenly. We discussed that. You didn't give up ownership of anything. That's not the point, he snapped. Then he caught himself, smoothed his tone. Look, I'm not trying to fight. I just don't want to feel like a guest in this place. The phrase hit differently in daylight. I've never treated you like a guest, I said. You've lived here rent-free for 14 months. And I've contributed, he shot back. Utilities, food, I do things around here. Yes, I said, because we're partners. That doesn't mean it's free. I studied his face. He wasn't angry now. He was resolute. This wasn't a drunk rant. This was something he'd thought through, something he'd been coached on. Your sister helped you come to this conclusion, I said. He hesitated, just a beat, then nodded. She pointed out that I've been undervaluing myself. I almost smiled at that. Almost. Did she point out that you've been living in an apartment you don't own, without paying rent? She said that's irrelevant. Of course she did. His jaw tightened. You don't like my sister. I don't like bad math, I said. And I don't like entitlement dressed up as empowerment. That word landed hard. He stood up, pacing now. Why are you making this such a big deal? It's $800. You can afford it. There it was. Not should. Can. I can afford a lot of things, I said. That doesn't mean I owe them to you. He stopped pacing, looked at me like I'd disappointed him. I just want to feel secure, he said. What happens if we break up? I've built my life around this place. I leaned back in my chair. So your solution is to charge me rent in the apartment I own? Yes, he said, because then I'm protected. From what? From me. I felt something click into place then. Not anger, not sadness, but clarity. You're worried about your future, I said slowly, not ours. That's not fair. It's accurate, I corrected. If we were building a future together, you wouldn't be trying to establish a landlord-tenant dynamic inside a relationship. He crossed his arms again. Same posture as the night before. Defensive. I have rights, he repeated. You can't just ignore that. I nodded. You're right. His expression softened, just a little. I'm glad you see that, he said. Oh, I do, I replied, reaching for my phone again. You wanted recognition, structure, terms. He watched me now, uneasy. You don't need to make this complicated. You already did, I said. I'm just responding. I stood up, gathered my things, and headed for the door. We'll talk tonight, I said. I'll have something concrete for you. His shoulders relaxed. He smiled, relieved. Certain. Good, he said. I knew you'd come around. As I stepped into the hallway, the door closing softly behind me, I realized something chilling. Nathan wasn't trying to be my partner anymore. He was trying to be my claimant. And he had no idea how badly he'd misjudged me. By the time I got to work, my feelings had already gone quiet. The part of me that argues, hopes, negotiates. What took its place was simple. I wanted the truth on paper. I spent the day doing my job, answering emails, sitting through meetings, smiling at the right moments. But underneath all of it, my mind was working steadily, like a machine warming up. At lunch, I stepped outside and made a call. Hey, I said when he picked up. It's Marianne. My friend Alex had been a year ahead of me in college. Law school. Real estate law, specifically. We'd stayed close in that low-maintenance way adults do. Holiday texts, occasional dinners, the kind of friendship that doesn't need upkeep to hold. What's up? He asked. You sound calm. That's usually bad news for someone. I exhaled. Hypothetical question. Of course it is. If you own a property outright, I said, and your partner lives with you without a lease, what rights do they actually have? He didn't answer right away. I could hear the smile in his silence. Okay, he said finally. What did he do? I gave him the short version. The demand. The $800. The word rights tossed around like a magic spell. Alex laughed. Not a chuckle. A full, disbelieving laugh that went on long enough for me to pull the phone away from my ear. He wants to charge you rent, he said, breathless. In your own apartment? Yes. That you owned before you met him? Yes. And he doesn't pay rent now? Correct. There was another pause. Then, more controlled this time. That's creative. So, I said, what are my options? Well, Alex replied, shifting into professional mode. Right now, he's what we call a tenant at will. No lease, no ownership. He has some protections, meaning you can't throw his stuff onto the street tomorrow, but that's about it. And if he wants to make it a business arrangement? I asked. Alex chuckled again. Then you can absolutely make it a business arrangement. I leaned against the brick wall outside my office building. Meaning you draw up an actual lease, market rate, first month, last month, security deposit, clear terms, clear boundaries. He paused. If he wants landlord-tenant rules, he has to live under landlord-tenant rules. I smiled for the first time that day. That's legal? Completely, he said, as long as it's done properly. And honestly, if he's already claiming rights, this might be the cleanest way to handle it. Can you draft something? I asked. How soon do you want it? Today, I said. Send me the address and details, he replied. I'll have a lease by this afternoon. When I hung up, I didn't feel vindictive. I felt focused. This wasn't revenge. This was alignment. Nathan had reframed our relationship as a transaction. He'd reduced 2 years of shared life into a spreadsheet of perceived contributions. He wanted numbers. Fine, I would give him numbers. That evening, when I got home, he was in the kitchen, blending a smoothie, headphones on, humming to himself. He looked comfortable, like a man who believed the ground under his feet was solid. Hey, he said, pulling one earbud out. Good day? Productive, I replied. He smiled. I told you we'd figure it out. I didn't answer. I set my bag down, walked past him, and locked myself in the bedroom with my laptop. The lease arrived at 4:37 p.m. TACACBM. I read it carefully, twice. 2-bedroom unit. Comparable listing cited. Market rent set at $3,200 per month. Actually a little under what similar units in the building were going for. First month, last month. Standard security deposit. Clean, legal, unemotional. Exactly what he'd asked for. 3 days later, on Friday evening, I made sure everything was in place. Nathan was in the kitchen again, this time rinsing fruit at the sink. I was in the bathroom, door closed, listening. Right on schedule, the doorbell rang. Nathan, I called out casually. Can you get that? Yeah, he said, already moving. I stepped out just as he opened the door. A man in a neat jacket stood there holding a folder, late 50s, polite smile, professional posture. Nathan Reed, the man asked. Yes? You've been served. The words hung in the air like a dropped glass. Nathan stared at the folder, confused. Then he took it, slowly, like it might bite him. I walked into the hallway, towel draped over my arm. "What is it?" he asked me, already opening it. He read the first page, then the second. The color drained from his face in real time. His voice cracked. "This is a lease agreement." "Yes," I said, "it is." "You're charging me $3,200 a month?" His hands started to shake. "That can't be right." "Market rate for a two-bedroom in this building," I said calmly. "Units on the 4th and 7th floors are listed at $3,400. This says first month, last month, and a security deposit," he whispered. "That's standard," I replied. "Total comes to $9,600. He looked up at me, eyes wide. "That's almost $10,000. "Exactly," I said. "You wanted a business arrangement. Here it is." "I'm your fiancé," he said, incredulous. "You're also my tenant," I replied. "Your words, not mine." His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "You can't do this," he said. "I already did," I answered. "You have 30 days to sign and pay or vacate the premises." "Vacate?" His voice jumped. "You're kicking me out?" "I'm giving you a choice," I said, "just like you did." He looked at the lease again, then at me, panic blooming across his face. "We're supposed to get married," he said, like that should end the conversation. I reached up and slid the ring off my finger, the matching band he'd insisted we both wear. I set it gently on the counter between us. "Are we?" I asked. "People who plan a future together don't try to charge rent to exist." Nathan started to cry, big, uncontrolled sobs. He said I was cruel, that I was twisting his words, that he never meant it like this. I waited until he finished. "You told me," I said evenly, "that you were charging me $800 a month to live in my own apartment, that you had rights, that I needed to compensate you." I tilted my head. "Did I misunderstand something?" He swallowed. "My sister said—" "Your sister," I repeated. "Interesting." I picked up the lease and slid it back toward him. "Maybe she can help you come up with the deposit." He stood there, shaking, staring at the paper like it was written in a foreign language. He thought he'd asked for fairness. What he'd really asked for was rules, and rules don't bend for entitlement. I slept better than I expected that night. Not peacefully, but decisively. Like my body understood before my heart did that something irreversible had already happened. Nathan didn't sleep at all. I knew because I heard him pacing, the soft creak of the hallway floor, the fridge opening and closing. At one point, around 3 in the morning, he stood outside the bedroom door and didn't knock, just stood there, breathing, like he was waiting for me to rescue him from the consequences he'd invited. I didn't. By Saturday morning, the apartment felt crowded with tension. The air itself seemed thicker, like every surface was listening. I was making coffee when my phone buzzed. "Mom, Nathan's, call me. This has to stop." I stared at the screen for a long moment before setting the phone face down on the counter. 10 minutes later, the doorbell rang. I didn't have to look through the peephole to know who it was. When I opened the door, I was greeted by what could only be described as a coordinated arrival. Nathan's mother stood front and center, lips pressed tight, handbag clutched like armor. To her left was his sister, the same sister whose advice had apparently detonated my engagement, arms crossed, eyes already hostile. Behind them hovered his longtime friend from college, the one who'd toasted our engagement party with a joke about finally locking down a homeowner. They didn't wait for an invitation. "We need to talk," his mother said, stepping past me into the apartment. "Please," I replied evenly, closing the door behind them. "Make yourselves at home, in my apartment." His sister shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. "Don't be smug." "I'm not," I said. "I'm being accurate." They took seats in the living room like a panel of judges. Nathan was already there, still in pajamas, eyes red, posture collapsed. He didn't look up when I entered. His mother spoke first. "This lease nonsense needs to stop," she said. "You're being petty and vindictive." I set my coffee down carefully. Petty is arguing over dishes. Vindictive is revenge. This is a response. "You're punishing him," his sister snapped, "for trying to protect himself." "By charging me rent in the apartment I own?" I asked. "That I paid off years before I met him?" "He was establishing financial security," she insisted. "You women always want men to be dependent on you." I blinked. "That's an impressive reach," I said, "especially considering he's been living here rent-free." "He contributes," she said sharply. "Yes," I replied, "about $200 a month in utilities and maybe $300 in groceries." I paused, then continued calmly. "That's roughly $500 a month, for 14 months. I pulled out my phone. "That totals $7,000. The room went quiet. "I provided housing worth approximately $44,800 in that same period," I continued, "based on market rent." I looked directly at her. "Who exactly owes who equity here?" Silence. Nathan's mother shifted uncomfortably. She put an arm around her son's shoulders. "You're being deliberately cruel," she said softly. "He loves you. He made a mistake." "A mistake is shrinking a sweater," I replied. "A mistake is forgetting to pay a bill." I gestured around the room. Demanding payment to exist in someone else's home and calling it a right isn't a mistake. It's entitlement. The friend finally spoke. "So that's it? You're just going to throw away a 2-year relationship over money?" "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "Nathan drew this line. He set these terms. I'm simply responding to them." I checked my phone. 26 days, I said. "He can sign the lease. He can leave voluntarily, or he can wait for formal eviction." His sister laughed sharply. "You think you can just kick him out? He has tenant rights." "Then he should read the lease," I replied. "Tenants sign contracts." The entitlement didn't shrink after that conversation. It metastasized. Sunday night, I came home from dinner with a friend and immediately knew something was wrong. The apartment looked rearranged. My gaming console, the monitor, the chair I'd bought after my last promotion, all gone from the living room. I followed the empty space down the hall to the second bedroom. The door was closed, locked, from the inside. "Nathan?" I knocked once, hard. "This room is mine now," he said through the door. "You can't kick me out of it." "That's my equipment," I said, "my property." "Finders keepers," he replied. "Tenant rights." I stood there in the hallway, hand still on the doorknob, stunned by how quickly he'd gone from partner to squatter. "You realize this changes nothing about the lease," I said. "I'm not signing it," he snapped. "I'm not paying you anything, and I'm not leaving." I exhaled slowly. "You're wrong about one thing," I said. "What?" "You're not as protected as you think." I went to my room and opened my laptop. From that moment on, I treated everything like it might end up in front of a judge. By Monday morning, I wasn't angry anymore. Anger wastes energy. What I felt instead was a cold, methodical resolve, the kind that shows up when you realize someone isn't confused, they're calculating. I slept with my bedroom door locked, not because I was afraid Nathan would hurt me, but because I no longer trusted his respect for boundaries. There's a difference. I woke up early and called a locksmith. He arrived at 9 sharp, middle-aged, efficient, uninterested in drama. I explained exactly what I needed done, using careful, neutral language. "I need the lock on the master bedroom changed," I said, "and I need a hasp lock installed on the outside of the second bedroom door." He raised an eyebrow. "Inside dispute?" "Yes," I replied. "Documented." That seemed to satisfy him. Nathan didn't emerge from the spare room until close to noon. I was at the kitchen table, packing my work bag, when I heard the door creak open. He stepped into the hallway cautiously, like someone testing whether the ground was still there. Then he noticed. He tried the master bedroom door first. Locked. "What did you do?" he demanded, panic cutting through his voice. I didn't look up. I established territory. "That's harassment," he snapped. "You can't lock me out of rooms." "Tenants don't have access to the owner's private bedroom," I said calmly, "and tenants don't get to barricade themselves in rooms with the owner's property." He stormed toward the spare bedroom, then stopped short when he saw the metal hasp on the outside of the door. "What is that?" he said. "Insurance," I replied. "Your clothes are in garbage bags in the hall closet. You're free to retrieve them." His face twisted. "I'm calling the cops." "Please do," I said, finally looking at him. "I'd love to explain how you locked yourself in a room with thousands of dollars of electronics that don't belong to you." He hesitated. I leaned back in my chair. "It's called conversion. You might want to look it up." He didn't call the police. Instead, he called his sister. For 2 hours, I could hear the muffled shouting through the walls, the pacing, the slammed door, the emotional spiral of someone realizing their bluff had been called and their hand was empty. That evening, when I came home from work, Nathan's mother was sitting at my kitchen table. She didn't stand when she saw me, just folded her hands and said, "We need to discuss this like adults." "I agree," I said. "Where's your son?" "In his room." "You mean the spare bedroom," I corrected. "In this unit." She sighed, rubbing her temples. "Are you really going to keep doing this?" "Doing what?" "Being hostile." I set my bag down. "Ma'am, your son demanded I pay him rent to live in a home I own. Then he locked himself in a room with my belongings. Then he claimed tenant rights to avoid consequences." I met her eyes. I've been remarkably patient. She looked away. "He's scared," she said quietly. "He feels like he has no security, no future." I let that sit for a moment. "He was getting married," I said, "to someone who owned her home outright. No mortgage, no debt. That was security." She swallowed. "His sister can be persuasive." "His sister told him to shake down his fiancé for rent money," I said flatly. "That's not persuasion, that's delusion." She didn't argue. "You can still fix this," she said finally. "Tear up the lease. Forgive him." "And then what?" I asked. "We get married, and he tries this again. With a house we buy together, with retirement accounts, with anything he decides he's entitled to." She had no answer. 23 days, I said. "He can sign the lease. He can leave voluntarily, or he can wait for formal eviction." I paused. Those are the options. The dirty tricks started after that, and they all had the same smell, panic dressed up as power. He rummaged through my filing cabinet. He let his sister flood my phone with accusations. He tried to turn my home into a stage, and when he realized none of it moved me, he started breaking things. Day 11, I noticed my filing cabinet had been disturbed. Tax returns, bank statements, the deed to the apartment, all moved. Nathan claimed he was cleaning and put them somewhere safe. I found them later in a box in the hall closet. He was looking for something. Debt, leverage, proof I wasn't as secure as I claimed. He found nothing. Day 13, his sister started texting me. Long, rambling messages about financial abuse, control, power imbalance. I screenshot every one. No replies. Day 15, I came home to a dinner party I hadn't approved. 4 of his friends in my living room, drinking my beer, using my dishes, laughing like they belonged there. I took one look at the scene, walked to the couch, and lifted a cushion. "What are you doing?" one of them asked, confused. "Removing my furniture," I replied calmly. I carried the cushions into my bedroom, one by one. "You're welcome to sit on the floor," I added. The party ended quickly after that. Day 17, my coffee maker was broken. My Breville, $250. "Things break," Nathan shrugged when I asked what happened. "Cool," I said. "I'll add it to your tab." "What tab?" "The running total," I replied. "We're at $37,800 in unearned housing equity, plus $250. His face went blank. "Should I keep going?" I asked. He didn't answer. The deadline was coming. And this time, there would be no misunderstandings. By the time the 3rd week began, the apartment no longer felt like a home. It felt like a countdown. Every interaction with Nathan had narrowed to logistics. No small talk, no nostalgia, no pretending. Just the quiet hostility of 2 people occupying the same space with radically different understandings of reality. I kept records, dates, screenshots, receipts, one folder, one timeline. On day 22, I met with Alex in person. He spread the paperwork across the table between us like a map. "You've been more than reasonable," he said. "Honestly, more than most people would be." "So what happens next?" I asked. "We file the formal eviction notice," he replied. 7 days to vacate. Sheriff enforced if necessary. I nodded. "Do it." There was no drama in my voice when I said it. No hesitation. Alex glanced at me. "You're sure?" "Yes." The notice was filed that afternoon. Nathan received it the next morning. I was eating breakfast when he stormed into the kitchen, waving the papers like they were radioactive. "You're evicting me?" he shouted. "I'm formalizing reality," I said, taking another sip of coffee. "You can't do this," he snapped. "I have rights." "You had options," I corrected. "You chose none of them." He paced, running his hands through his hair. "You're trying to make me homeless." "I offered you a lease," I said. "You declined." "This is abuse," he said suddenly, eyes lighting with something new. "Financial abuse. Emotional abuse." I set my mug down. "You're welcome to tell that to the court," I replied, along with an explanation for why you locked yourself in a room with my property and threw unauthorized parties. He froze. I leaned forward. "I have everything documented, Nathan. Every message, every incident, every witness." His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time since this started, I saw it. Fear. Real fear. That night, he didn't sleep in the spare room. He slept on the couch, curled in on himself like a guest overstaying their welcome. Day 24, he tried one last angle. "I never wanted this to go so far," he said quietly, standing in the doorway of the kitchen. "We could still fix this." "By doing what?" I asked. "By tearing up the lease, forgetting all of it." "And what about the next demand?" I asked. "The next boundary you decide is negotiable?" He didn't answer. Day 26, he stopped unpacking his bags. Day 27, he stopped arguing. Day 28, he stopped speaking to me altogether. On the morning of day 29, I woke up early and sat at the kitchen table alone. I'd slept more deeply than I had in weeks. At 9 a.m., Nathan emerged from the spare room. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, hair unwashed. The confidence that once filled him completely gone. "I'm not leaving," he said flatly. "I know you can't make me." I looked at the clock. "Yes," I said, "I can." His brow furrowed. "What does that mean?" "It means the sheriff will be here at 2 p.m. The color drained from his face. "You're having me arrested." "No," I replied, "removed." He laughed weakly. "I'll tell them you abused me." "You can try," I said. "I'll give them the evidence." I stood up and walked past him toward my bedroom. 5 hours, I added. "You might want to start packing." He didn't follow me. He didn't argue. For the first time since this began, he understood something important. This wasn't a negotiation anymore. It was enforcement. At 11:45, the doorbell rang. Not the sharp official knock I'd been bracing for, but a softer one. Hesitant, familiar. When I opened the door, Nathan's mother stood there with boxes stacked at her feet. She didn't say hello. She just nodded once and stepped inside. Behind her, Nathan's sister followed, keys in hand, already scanning the apartment like she was inventorying what could be salvaged. Neither of them looked at me. Nathan came out of the spare room slowly, like someone being summoned to court. His shoulders slumped. He didn't meet my eyes. "Let's get this done," his sister said briskly. "We don't have all day." I crossed my arms and leaned against the wall, watching. They packed in silence at first. Clothes, shoes, a few framed photos he'd brought with him when he moved in. Pictures of people who would never set foot in this apartment again. Every so often, his sister muttered something under her breath. "You didn't have to take it this far. You could have been flexible. You didn't have to embarrass him." I didn't respond. At noon, Nathan's mother finally looked at me. "You didn't have to humiliate him," she said quietly. I met her gaze. I didn't. He did. She flinched just slightly. "He's never handled money well," she said. "He panics when he feels insecure." "And I'm supposed to pay for that?" I asked. She didn't answer. Nathan reached for a box labeled kitchen, then froze. "What about the ring?" his sister asked sharply. "You're not asking for that back, are you?" "I am," I said. Her head snapped up. "That was a gift." "In this state," I replied evenly, "an engagement ring is a conditional gift. The engagement ended. The condition failed." Nathan looked between us, eyes glassy. "I need it back," I said, "now." He hesitated, long enough for his sister to step in. "You don't get to take everything from him," she said angrily. I held her gaze. "Watch me." Nathan reached into his pocket and placed the ring on the counter without a word. It made a small sound when it hit the stone. Final. Unforgiving. I picked it up and slid it into my palm. At 1:30, the last box was carried out. Nathan stood in the doorway, duffel bag slung over his shoulder, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. For a moment, I thought he might say something. Apologize, rage, beg. Instead, he whispered, "You ruined everything." I shook my head. "You did. I just stopped you." He turned and walked out. His mother lingered for half a second longer. She looked back at the apartment, at the walls, the quiet, the space her son had tried to claim without earning. Her expression wasn't anger. It was embarrassment. Then she left too. At 2 p.m. sharp, a sheriff's cruiser pulled up outside. They didn't need to knock. I met them at the door, showed them the paperwork, the empty apartment, the evidence folder open on my laptop. One of them nodded. "Looks like it's already handled." "Yes," I said, "it is." They left as quickly as they'd arrived. When the door closed behind them, the silence settled in fully. Not tense, not heavy, clean. I walked through the apartment slowly, room by room. The spare bedroom was empty. The living room was mine again. The kitchen counters were bare. For the first time in weeks, I could breathe. Nathan hadn't lost a home. He'd lost access to mine. The apartment didn't feel lonely after they left. It felt lighter. That surprised me. I stood in the doorway for a long time after the last car pulled away, listening to the hum of the building, someone's footsteps above me, a door closing down the hall, the distant sound of traffic outside. Ordinary noises. Life continuing. The kind of sounds you don't notice when chaos is loud. I locked the door, turned the deadbolt, then checked it again. Not out of fear, out of habit, out of finality. The ring sat on the kitchen counter where I'd left it, catching the afternoon light. I didn't pick it up right away. I let it sit there, an object stripped of its promise, reduced to metal and stone. Later, I put it in a small box and slid it into a drawer. Out of sight, not out of mind, but contained. The first few days were strange in quiet ways. I'd find myself reaching for 2 mugs instead of 1, pausing before starting the coffee maker that wasn't there anymore, noticing the absence of his shoes by the door, his jacket on the chair, his voice filling the space with opinions I hadn't asked for. There were no tears. Just moments of stillness where my body expected disruption and didn't get it. On the 3rd day, my phone buzzed with a notification from an unknown number. Unknown. "Hey, Marianne, this is Mark." I frowned. Then it clicked. Mark, Nathan's brother-in-law. Mark, I heard what happened. I just wanted to say, between us, My wife's been in my ear about the same stuff for years. Rent, equity, compensation. I stared at the message longer than I probably should have. Mark, if she ever tried it for real, I'd do exactly what you did. You weren't wrong. I didn't reply. I saved the message. Some patterns don't start with one person. They just get louder when someone finally refuses to play along. A week later, a certified envelope arrived. Inside was the engagement ring, wrapped carefully in tissue paper. A short note from Nathan's attorney confirmed what I already knew. Conditional gift. Engagement ended. Item returned. I added it to the drawer without ceremony. Alex stopped by that evening with takeout and a bottle of wine I didn't open. "Still okay?" he asked. "Yes," I said honestly. "More than okay." We went over the final numbers, not because I needed to, but because closure sometimes comes in columns and totals. 14 months of free housing, approximately $44,800. Destroyed coffee maker, $250. Locksmith, $185. Legal fees, $1,200. Worth it? Absolutely. Alex packed up his papers and stood by the door. "You know," he said, "if he'd waited until after the wedding, this would have been a nightmare." I nodded. I know. That was the part that lingered. Not the fight, not the eviction, but the timing. He hadn't changed. He'd just revealed himself before the paperwork made it irreversible. That night, I sat on the couch in my living room. My couch, in my home. No tension, no negotiations, no one counting my worth in imaginary